Welcome back to the Anti-Meta Meta Club. This week's Anti-Meta car is something I have never used or enjoyed until this week, and it only became available because it doesn't take too long to take tires with this Group 4 tire-saving race. Let's get into it. The Anti-Meta car of the week is the Genesis G70. An overall good contender, it doesn't really matter too much if the tire wear isn't that great because the best bet is to take tires anyways, and on top of that, the all-wheel drive really helps out when you go over any of the curbs or the chicane wrong. The Citroen is definitely the meta car this week, but the G70 is a close second. That's why I chose it. Our friend Windfire hit an absolutely amazing lap with it, and he actually hit that the very first night. I bet it's going to stay in the top 10. I managed a 36.3 with the tune that I developed, but I think it's actually capable of a high 35. What's really cool about this week is that there are a lot of cars that can crack in the top 10, and on top of that, they're actually viable for the race itself because taking tires is actually the move. I came up with this tune after trying out a few that didn't quite work out for me. Big shout out to Spr Eff for giving me his tune, which actually inspired a few of the changes that I made. Don't forget you got to set this up manually every single time that you enter time trial or the race itself. As we start on the lap, I want to note that the first corner we actually turn in a lot before we start hitting the brakes, and your turn-in point is right in between the two bleachers, right at the stairwell between those two bleachers on the right. After your car settles from coming off the curb, then you apply brakes just gently, getting the car to tuck in right at the beginning of the curbing here on the inside. Once you're off the brakes, turn in a little bit more, then gently add throttle. Getting on the throttle too hard here will cause the car to understeer. Your car should still turn in as you exit, so make sure that you continue steering as you get onto this exit curve and do not go past it. Your braking point is actually right at the beginning of the sand after the grass, but what you gotta do is move onto the curb, avoiding the high lip portion of it. Full brake, down to third gear, then start trail braking in. You wanna use as much of this curb as you can without bouncing on it. Continue steering left, add a little bit of throttle, and your goal is to change directions entirely by the time you get to the sand on the left. At that point, we're gonna lift off the throttle, tap the brakes just a little bit to make sure that we can completely straddle this sausage. The angle that I went over this sausage is almost too far to the right. It's actually safer to put the right tires closer to the inside sausage. Your goal is to gently get on the throttle as you go over it, then full throttle and stay full throttle as you navigate the car all the way over the next one and all the way to the exit. This car is really stable going over the curb, so if you do end up going in the red, you're not going to be in trouble as long as you don't have too much steering angle or a really weird attack angle. From here, this back straight isn't quite a full-on straight, so make sure you don't touch the grass on the inside there, stay close to the left, and then look deep into the distance for the next braking zone. Look for the gray curb on the right. We're not going to go up onto it, but right at the beginning is your braking point. It's important that you brake hard in a straight line and you don't turn in until you've gotten all the way past the 50-meter board. Trail brake and turn in as much as the car will allow, and once you've gotten deep into the bottom of second gear, then you can come all the way off the brake, turn in even more, and get back on the throttle. If you understeer a little bit, that's okay, but if you're understeering a lot here, you're either going too fast or you've got too much steering angle. Get back on the tarmac, then use this little bit of curb so you can set yourself up at the right angle to start turning in at the orange bit at the end of the barrier on the right. I like to lift gently as I go over this curb just to tighten up the angle so I can get all the way to the left before the next turn-in point. Turn in at the sand and lift off just gently. I did all of that a little bit too early, but I was able to maintain speed despite the fact that I went way over the curb. Add as much throttle as you can as you move yourself to the right side of the track, and right at that orange and black barrier, we're going to switch directions, brake just gently, and downshift to third gear. Squeeze on that throttle as you get to the apex and track yourself all the way out. Again, this car's really stable, but if you hit this curb at a really weird angle, it can suck you off into the sand. From here, follow the direction of the curb, taking a straight line all the way to the next one down this little hill, and right when you get to this black spot that you see on the red, that's when we're going to turn in and gently add brake. We're initially going to go about 80% brake and then come off, staying in fourth gear as we go past this first curb. Downshift to third after you get over that first curb, continue to turn in, tuck it in really tightly, and then get on the throttle as you pass that orange part of the barrier. Your goal is to miss this curb, but then apex on the very next curb. If you've timed it right, you'll hit this curb, then you'll miss the next one, and you'll barely stay on the track right here. That'll allow you to keep up a lot of speed and then just barely track out onto the curb on this exit, and you should be good to go. That sequence is going to take a lot of trial and error, but the general idea is you want to brake once and get on the throttle once. You want to treat it as one big turn. Looking at the meter boards that are hanging above the track, we're going to brake right at the 100, and you do not want to go up on the curb for this braking zone. Get to third gear and turn in before you get to the 50-meter board, and then get to second gear as you let off the brakes just gently to get close to this next apex. I actually completely missed the inside curb, and I do that on purpose to stay really wide. Turn a little bit more once you're fully off the brakes to get the car to rotate all the way, then get on that throttle and stay on the throttle till the end. In a perfect world, you'll come off the brakes, turn in, allow the car to rotate, and then get on that throttle once, but I always have to add throttle and then lift off to just kind of fix it. Alright, full speed time. Like I said before, we're not going to brake until after we turn in. You can actually go a lot closer to the inside. As long as you avoid the very top lip part of that inside curve, you should be fine. There are a lot of different ways to do T1, but as long as you're on the throttle early and you stay there, you'll be fine. You can actually take a lot more of this curve. You can actually completely straddle that first curve, not just the two sausage curbs, and if you do that, you should be able to get on the throttle a lot earlier than I did. I got a 0.4 here, I've gotten a 0.3, I imagine Windfire probably got like a 0.2, if not even faster than that. The biggest mistake that I see people do constantly is hitting the brakes and then immediately turning in. You want to brake as long as you can in a straight line and then turn in at the very end. It's the most efficient way to do any kind of corner like this. I made some dumb mistakes on this. If you avoid this curb, it's probably better, and completely avoiding the next one is definitely going to be better than monster trucking the grass like I did. That slowed me down, took me a long time to get on the throttle, and I had a weird angle for this. I probably lost an entire tenth, if not more, just there. Like I said before, you want to hit, miss when it comes to these curbs. And you should do it in just 2 moves, braking and then throttling. I got on the throttle and lifted just a little bit, but it wasn't too bad. For this final curve, I treat it like one corner and I single apex it. I've never been able to hit this first curb and maintain speed. I was able to do this in just 2 moves, just brake and then throttle. A lot of the time I have to blip the throttle to get the weight shifting to the front after I lift off to get it to rotate more, but I was actually pretty happy with how I did that final curve. Last night I managed to get an okay race in, but it wasn't that great, and then I did another one in the American region at 11 p.m., which also was not great. So I tried one more, moving over to EMEA, and it was like 11:30 Pacific, so I guess it was maybe, 7:30 a.m. over there, and I had an incredibly clean and fun race. I really appreciated pretty much everyone's racecraft. This race kind of starts slow, so we're going to take right now to discuss the different strategies that you can use. A Group 4 race with a required pit stop but no required tire compounds is a pretty common thing, and usually we try to find a car that can no-stop the race. I shouldn't say no-stop because we are stopping, but I mean a car that doesn't require you to change the tires. 2 weeks ago was really tough, and the S15 at Autopolis was also pretty tough for controller users, so I was actually pretty stoked about the fact that even the Citroen drivers are taking tires. That means that a lot more cars are viable. I've mentioned this in the past, but obviously we don't want to take tires if we don't have to. If everyone is going to anyways and the penalty isn't that long, I think it's only 2 seconds to add tires, then what we want to do is look for a pit window. It would be optimal to pit between lap 5 and 6. However, if you're really desperate, if there are some really slow or dangerous drivers directly in front of you, you can either wait for them to pit and go extra long in your first stint, or you could pit as early as lap 4, hoping for an undercut and hoping that your tires can last all the way to the end of the race. It shouldn't be that bad if you do undercut and go in on lap 4, but it will definitely be a lot slower than if you don't. We're going to come back and address the chicane in just a moment, but I want to point this out. I was positioned for an overtake, and luckily I braked at the normal time, but if I was going for a dive there, which is a pretty common thing with most people, and that guy moved across my line like that, I would not be able to avoid him. If you don't already know, some people just brake later, and they can still hit the apex. Some people brake really early, and unless you are absolutely certain about who you are and who your opponent is at that exact moment, then you absolutely should not move anywhere close to the braking zone. I don't think he was being deliberately dirty. We did actually make contact at one of the upcoming corners, but he actually gave me room too. So it's really interesting. A lot of people are just kind of clumsy, or they don't realize what they're doing is dangerous or would be considered dirty. So it's always good to give people an extra chance, and hopefully he'll be educated on this and not pull off these kind of moves again. So here I was actually planning to follow him into the corner, but he made a mistake and understeered a lot, and then the Swift kind of pushed me into him. That guy ended up with the worst of it, but I don't think the Swift was necessarily trying to push me. I think he went too deep, whereas I had to slow down too much. I understeered with that other guy, so it was really difficult to predict exactly where I would be and where that other Citroen would be. You can kind of tell he wasn't deliberately trying to be dirty because he didn't push me off when he had an opportunity to do so. If you go back, you can actually see the Swift gave me a lot of space on the exit of that corner that he did hit me in, so it's really interesting. A lot of people just make mistakes and they're not necessarily trying to be dirty. Okay, I mentioned I was going to go over the chicane from the last lap, and even though it's probably not still in your mind, you can go back and check it out, but essentially a lot of people choose to completely avoid the sausage curb, and on top of that, it's also really difficult to see exactly where it is if you've got people really close in front of you. One reason this was a really easy anti-meta choice was because the meta car here is not going to have the same luck that you do if you both happen to take the curb wrong. A lot of these curbs, and especially the sausage curb, are really, really dangerous. They can easily get you to spin. You're probably going to see people spinning in every single race you do, but this car, because of the all-wheel drive, is insanely stable over all of them. If you do go back to lap 1, or if you just noticed, you'll see that I actually put both of my left tires directly on the highest part of the sausage curb, which is the most dangerous thing you can do, and the car took it like a champ. Massive shout out to that driver too. He gave me as much space as he needed. I gave him space, and I just had such a respectful race from all of these people today. I was really, really happy with this race. I mentioned in the breakdown that you can actually cut this first curb or straddle it so you can get wider and then get on the throttle even earlier, going over both of these sausage curbs. And Orca didn't cut the first one, but he did go super wide. The issue with that is, despite the fact that he has a better exit and had more speed coming through it, the slipstream kind of neutralized that, and he lost 4/10 just on the entrance. So it's really interesting. You have to get a good balance of the right line and the right amount of speed. I shouldn't say the right line. A balance of sacrificing the first corner so you can hit the two sausage curbs just right. On the last lap, you saw me deal with it with the guy in the Renault, and we're going to have to deal with it again here. A lot of people aren't going to take this corner really efficiently, and especially at the lower levels, if you find yourself in like a B or a C lobby, people are going to be taking those corners at completely different speeds than you most likely, and a lot of people just make mistakes. So if you're following someone really, really close there, I'd suggest lifting off and just trying to focus on getting a better exit so you can attack either in the quad corner or here. You've also got to be really careful if you decide to pass people on the outside here, and extra careful if you're passing on the inside. A lot of people are going to brake too late, and a lot of people will not give space, so make sure that you're giving space, and you're also being really wary of people who are just going to make mistakes on the inside. Again, a lot of people aren't going to deliberately push you off. A lot of people are just going to run out of talent before they can stop themselves from hitting you. Jumping forward close to the end of the next lap, I had a really amazing interaction with another G70 driver, which hilariously had a NASCAR livery that looked really legit. I had such good luck with other drivers today that I decided to just send it on the outside, and even though I didn't quite pull it off, he was both defending cleanly and pulling it off faster than me. So I just wanted to shout that out. He did amazing defending there, and he did it super clean. I absolutely love this kind of racing. I did have a run on him, but again, I was extra careful. I turned in early to match his line, and I definitely slowed down enough. He unfortunately did go wide, but that actually set it up so he had a better exit here. There was really nothing I could do, and I was afraid that if I moved to the left to defend right now, that I might actually cut off his nose or hit him, so I decided to just try to defend on the outside here. When you do defend on the outside, you can actually brake later because you're taking a wider line. And when doing that, you can also get on the throttle earlier too. So even though overall it would be slower, he also had a compromised line, and I ended up staying all the way in front of him. And of course, I trusted him from our earlier interaction, and I benefited from it. I really, really enjoyed racing that guy, and if you're watching Skywalker, that was such good driving. I find myself once again in the exact same situation, but this time with one of the meta cars. Again, I felt really trusting, so I tried to send it on the outside, and I didn't have as good luck as last time. I went a little bit too deep, and then he also went slightly too wide right here, so I did go all the way off. But as long as you have two tires on the tarmac, you still maintain clean tires. Since he was defending, I had no choice but to try to send it again on the outside, but I made a big mistake and I actually turned in too early. If you watch his line on the radar, he stuck to the inside, he hit the apex, and what really happened is I turned in too early. That was entirely on me. So I decided that I thought I had better pace than him, and it was the perfect time for me to pit, so I went in just now. When it comes to the pit exit, you don't actually have to use the brakes at all. Just stay full throttle, turn in, and lift to stay all the way up on the curb, making sure you get back on the throttle early enough. I actually waited a little bit too long because I wasn't quite sure what was going to happen with the Citroen, but he actually took the perfect line to stay in front. Again, turning in here, I made a miscalculation and I put two tires directly on the highest part of the curb, and it was totally fine. That is why I actually like this car now. I've really disliked this car since this game came out, but this week has completely changed my mind. Going to this corner is a perfect example of why you don't want to turn in early. You'll see that he started turning in really early and it took him a really long time to get the car rotated and to get back on the throttle. It's just really inefficient to try to brake and turn that much. You want to brake as much as you possibly can in a straight line. Now, as I try to sneak on the inside, I think he didn't quite realize that I had space initially, or just really wanted to try to close it off and didn't realize I was going to go faster. But as you can see, we both gave each other space on the other side of that corner, so no harm, no foul. If you were paying attention to when I went into the pits, I was actually in 5th place, but since I had such a good outlap, I was able to pass both Magford and Akko before they could come out of the pits. The idea of the undercut is that you're hoping to get a much faster and or cleaner lap than their lap after you come out of the pits. At the beginning of lap 7, Gran Turismo was 4.2 seconds ahead, but I was able to catch him at the middle of the last lap. He put up a great fight and we actually had a really good battle. He didn't have quite the same weaknesses that the other people did when I was racing against him. As you can see, he kept up more speed on that right-hander, and despite having a kind of weird line going to the left-hander, he kept up more speed there too. I didn't think I'd be able to pull off anything by diving on the inside, and I was right. He was fast enough, he hit that first apex, and then I braked a little bit prematurely, or I slowed down a little bit too much, and that allowed him to completely get away. I thought he was going to completely lose it there, but he didn't, and so I was forced to try to pass on the outside. I sent it with everything that I had, but again, I turned in just a little bit too early. Took me a little bit too long to get on the throttle, and I almost snuck by, but I had so committed to the throttle that I had no choice but to run directly into the back of him. But either way, it was a great race. I had a lot of fun with everyone here, especially Gran Turismo right there. You may have noticed that my fastest lap was a 137 flat. I've gotten a 136.8 with this tune, so you can definitely hit the 36s with this one. Thank you again for watching my video. If you liked what you saw, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And again, a massive thank you to the members that I'm just about to show on screen right after this. Thank you guys.